It's cold out there.
We've come in for the night. Hey, Brutus boy. Hey, Wooly. We bring all our sheep into this stone shelter. We call it a fold.
You see, out there in the night, there's wild animals. There's wolves. In fact, if you listen carefully, you might hear one howling right now.
Even robbers will try to break into the fold and steal our sheep. Even kill them. But my job is to help the shepherd. Have you ever met a shepherd? Well, their job has been around a long, long time. You know, it's not the most glamorous job. It's a lot of long hours out in the frost, in the cold, all hours of the day, in the outdoors, living with the wild beasts, protecting the sheep. So it takes a certain type of person to be a shepherd. But it's a very important job. In fact, around these parts, both men and women play a part in taking care of the sheep. Do you remember Rachel? She met Jacob when she was coming down to a well to water her father's flock. And then there was Zipporah, who would eventually marry Moses. She met him at a well as well when she came to water her father's sheep. You see, sheep need a lot of water. And in these parts, water's really scarce. So people will fight to decide who gets the water for their sheep. So I have to help my family in a similar way, to take our sheep out every day, to make sure that they're watered. I know people don't think this is a very good job, but our sheep, like Brutus here and Wooly, they give us so much. They're meat for our food and wool for our clothing. We can even use their milk to drink or make food. So our brave shepherds have a very important job. In fact, if you asked anyone, what's the primary responsibility of a shepherd? They would say it's to care for the sheep and to protect them. Just like David. Do you remember David? Oh, I love the stories of David. I love hearing how he would go out and even fight off lions and bears to protect his sheep. You see, I have to make sure I'm armed at all times with my staff and weapon, because you never know what you might face. But it's not just the job of a shepherd to protect the sheep. We also have to feed the sheep and lead them beside still waters and beside the green pastures. In fact, does that remind you of something? Have you ever heard of Psalm 23? In fact, you might be able to say this with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. You see, a shepherd is very loving. He will even run after one lost sheep and bring him back home on his shoulders to the rest of the flock. Now, you might ask, if you've never met a shepherd, why do sheep even need shepherds? I mean, other animals out there don't need a human being to protect them. Well, you see our sheep here, like Brutus and Wooly, they've been domesticated. That means they're tamed. They can't protect themselves from the wild beasts. Don't tell them, but they'd get eaten alive out there. So it's the job of people like me and the shepherds to help protect them. Our sheep totally depend on the shepherds to do everything for them. But that doesn't mean they're dumb. Oh, no. Betsy here and Wooly and Brutus and all our sheep wouldn't want anybody calling them dumb. See, sheep are very smart animals. And if you work with sheep, you'll know this. They form deep and lasting bonds and friendships with each other. They can tell if other sheep are happy, sad, stressed, just by reading the facial expressions. I'm not making this up, it's true, and if you ever work with sheep, you'd believe me. They even stick up for each other in a fight. And they grieve and feel sad when they lose one of their friends. They're so smart that sheep even know their own names, just like a dog. Sheep can recognize over 50 different faces and remember them for many, many years, Isn't that amazing? These animals are so intelligent. But I think the most important thing of all is that sheep recognize the voice of their shepherd, because he is the voice they trust. He is the voice that feeds them and protects them. And what's even more amazing is if our sheep here see an unfamiliar voice or unfamiliar face lurking around, like maybe a robber, our sheep run away because they know that it's not the true shepherd. Well, in fact, just today, when I was out in the village taking Brutus and Wooly and Betsy and all the sheep out, I was walking by the village to water the flocks, and I heard a teacher, a great teacher, the greatest teacher I've ever heard. His name was Jesus. And it just so happened that he was telling the people about being a shepherd. He said, "I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep. And the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." You see, what I learned was that Jesus was saying that we are the sheep, those of us that follow him in his teaching. Sometimes, though, he went on to tell the people that when the shepherd has to go away on a journey, he has to hire someone to look after the sheep. So that person will get paid money and come and stay here with Brutus and Wooly. But you know what happens on a night like tonight? If a wolf were to come and try to steal a sheep, what do you think that man would do? Do you think he'd protect the sheep? Do you think he'd take his weapons and his staff and protect the sheep? No. That man would run because he's not the true shepherd and he doesn't lay down his life for the sheep. But Jesus said that he was a real shepherd. He said, "I know my sheep and my sheep know my voice, and I lay down my life for the sheep." What Jesus was telling the people was that these hired helpers are like the Pharisees. Pharisees are the rulers of today. They're supposed to be the shepherds and care for the people, but they don't. They only care for themselves. So how blessed we are that we have a God who has given us his son Jesus to be our true shepherd. And we are God's flock, the sheep of his pasture. What I've learned in all my years of helping take care of the sheep is that it's our job to learn the voice of our shepherd and to recognize him. And we can do this by reading our scriptures. The more we read about him, the more we'll be able to recognize his voice and not be fooled when a robber tries to come in pretending to be the shepherd. And if we follow him, the true shepherd, he will protect us from the wolves out there. So I think today one of the things we need to focus on is that we must hear the voice of Jesus, hear the voice of our shepherd. And when he calls us, we must follow him. Well, as I say my prayers, go ahead and say it with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside the still waters. Well, friends, good night. Brutus and Betsy here will be waking up any moment. And I've got a long day ahead of me. Shh. Good night, friends.